Hi, my name is Dave, and I recently finished watching Season 3 of The Boys. And that got me thinking about a really goofy idea. What if we took the main cast from High Guardian Spice and had them fight to the death with the main cast from The Boys? A brawl of epic proportions, team v team, Spice Girls v Spice Girls.
They're the goddamn fucking Spice Girls.
And yes, if you're wondering, I made this video just so I could make that joke. Totally worth it. Now, if you don't know what The Boys is, what are you doing with your life? Go watch it, it's awesome. But essentially, it's a story about a ragtag group of crazy people trying to take down superheroes. Also, just so we're clear, we're talking about the show, not the comic book, so nothing in there is relevant here. But how's this fight gonna go down exactly? Well, I think the most important thing is figuring out the team lineup first. For the sake of making things fair, I decided to give each team an equal number of members and make it a 6v6. So the roster that I came up for this hypothetical would be Rosemary, Thyme, Parsley, Sage, Amaryllis, and Snapdragon versus Huey, Butcher, Frenchie, Starlight, MM, and Kimiko. So this here is our roster, and I will have to go over all of them, so this might take a while. And while we're at it, I'm going to set some ground rules to make this fight as entertaining as possible. So for the sake of making this fight interesting and not an absolute stomp, physical stats are going to be equalized. So if you don't know what that means, basically the strength, speed, and durability of all the characters will be equal, so no one's going to be stronger or faster than one another. I decided to make this rule because when I looked into the scaling for the boys, it turns out that they would have way higher AP, durability, and speed than the Spice Girls. And at that point, the fight really wouldn't be entertaining to talk about, it would just be one side speeding up and instantly one-shotting the other. I will still be going over each side's physical statistics in their section, but that's mostly for entertainment purposes. But in a matchup where the stats aren't equalized, the boys would probably just clear. They're just way too strong and way too fast. Second rule, each team will have their standard equipment. This means equipment that they would realistically have if they were just thrown into a battle situation. This also means that neither side is getting preparation time. They're just being thrown into this fight, they don't know who they're going up against or what they're capable of, and they don't have any time to prepare. So for the boys, this means they won't have access to the Russian nerve agent, which they used to defeat Soulja Boy, along with other things like extra doses of Compound V. And for Team High Guardian Spice, this means they won't be getting access to things like healing water, extra potions, and stuff like that. Now, I think a fight with prep time could also be an interesting discussion, since you have characters like Frenchie who are able to cook up a bunch of various chemicals and weapons to fight superheroes. And you also have characters like Amaryllis and Sage who can make various potions and prepare magical rituals. But for the sake of keeping things simple, this fight will be without prep time and with standard equipment. Rule number 3, the fight is going to take place in a neutral environment, so let's just say like a grassy field during the daytime. Different environments can give certain teams advantages over the other. For example, if the fight were to take place in a forest, a character like Thyme would get an advantage, and if the fight were to take place in like Vought Tower, someone like Starlight would get more energy. So the environment is kept neutral to mitigate this. And for the fourth and final rule I'll be bringing up in this section, each team is willing to kill. Now in character, most of these people wouldn't be willing to fight each other, as one side is a group of children and the other side mostly has morals. But for this hypothetical, each team knows that they need to kill each other and is 100% willing to do it. Outside of that, they'll act in character. So yeah, these are the basic ground rules. There are a couple other rulings that I will bring up in other sections to make the fight more interesting, but these are essentially the main ones. So with all that out of the way, why don't we start analyzing these two teams to see who can come out on top. I'm going to be going over the boys first, since they're probably the group that most people watching this channel know the least about. So let's get started.
Evening, cunts!
Starting off with the boys, why don't we talk about their leader first, William Butcher. In this section, we're going to bring up our first new ruling, that being both Butcher and Huey will be on V24 for the sake of the fight. If you aren't aware, V24 is a special version of Compound V that lasts for 24 hours. People who use it gain superpowers for a very limited amount of time, that being 24 hours. For the fight, we're going to be assuming that both Butcher and Huey will have 24 hours of their powers. So, Billy Butcher, he was originally a member of the British Special Forces, and later on in life began to gain a hatred for superheroes. Especially for Homelander, the guy who's essentially the Superman of this universe. Butcher has made a career out of taking down superheroes that fall out of line, and he established the boys for this purpose. He's an expert at taking down people with superhuman abilities, and has gone through military training, knowing how to use a various amount of firearms. Weapons he has access to include things like sniper rifles, grenades, and other explosives, along with other firearms like handguns. While he will be getting his superpowers in this fight, even without superpowers, Butcher is still a force to be reckoned with. He was able to go toe-to-toe with Translucent, a man with carbon skin that's essentially bulletproof. He's also a really quick thinker, being able to figure out how to counteract certain superpowers on the fly. So even without his superpowers, he's still a deadly person to go up against, but with his superpowers, it's a whole different ballgame. While on V-24, he gains superhuman strength, speed, and durability. He's essentially bulletproof and can take down even some of the strongest supes. Along with all of his enhanced statistics, he also gains the ability to fire energy out of his eyes. This energy is powerful enough to slice straight through cars and also solid metal. But one of Butcher's best feats while he's on V-24 is going toe-to-toe with Homelander. He's able to stagger, push back, and even hold down Homelander on various occasions. If you aren't aware, Homelander is a guy who can survive massive building-destroying explosions, take down jet planes, and has survived basically every weapon that's been thrown at him. So the fact that William is able to go toe-to-toe with him is insanely impressive. Not to mention, Homelander also outran an explosion on one occasion, making his speed ridiculously high. That's another reason why I decided to make physical stats equal for this fight, as the boys would be way too fast. So in summary, Butcher is a very clever fighter who's gone through firearms training, has access to various lethal weapons, along with the ability to shoot energy out of his eyes. Next up we have Huey, another member of the boys, and the guy who has to essentially keep Butcher's morals in check. Now, while he's off Compound V, Huey's essentially your average dude. However, he can be very clever in certain situations. He figured out how to defeat Translucent by electrocuting him, and also can come up with various plans to distract and also help out with defeating superheroes. So while he's not all that threatening off Compound V, once he's on Compound V, he becomes incredibly deadly. Compound V gave Huey the ability to teleport long distances, and also super strength, speed, and durability. Only issue is he can't take objects with him when he teleports, so he becomes naked every time he does it. While on Compound V, he was able to push back Homelander and could even react to and avoid all of his attacks. He was also able to help hold him down. And the distance for Huey's teleportation is incredibly long. Not only can he take other people with him whenever he teleports, he can also teleport for potentially miles. While they were hunting for a character named Mindstorm, it was stated that he was miles away from where they arrived, and Huey was able to teleport all the way back to where Butcher was. So essentially, Huey can teleport people long distances, along with taking away all the stuff they have on them. Next up we have Starlight, a superhero who became a member of the Seven, which is a group of Earth's mightiest heroes. She did this only to find out that the Seven kind of suck. Later on, she met Huey and began to fall in love with him, and is now a member of the boys helping to take down superheroes that break the law. Her superpowers include enhanced strength, speed, and durability. She's also able to drain energy from various light sources around her in order to fire out projectile blasts. These powerful energy blasts are able to send grown men flying backwards, and are even strong enough to stagger powerful heroes like Soldier Boy. Starlight is also seemingly able to draw power from the sun as well, as she's able to use her energy blasts even when there aren't light sources around. Her skin is so durable that she's able to survive multiple high-caliber shots to the chest without a scratch. She can also take hits from very powerful superheroes like Stormfront and Soldier Boy. Starlight becomes more powerful the more energy she absorbs, and if she absorbs enough light, she gains the ability to levitate. Starlight has only done this once on screen, and it seems to only be a power she can access when she has an insane amount of energy flowing through her body. Because this fight takes place in a neutral environment, she probably won't be able to access her flight. On top of this, Annie is also a very capable fighter, and was also shown training before joining the Seven in order to make the cut. Next up we have Kimiko. Kimiko was originally a member of the Shining Light Liberation Army. This army was considered a terrorist group by America, and because of this, Vought International, the company behind superheroes, decided to try and kidnap some of their members to try and test Compound V. Vought wanted to create a group of supervillains in order to get superheroes into the army. Kimiko was supposed to be one of these quote-unquote supervillains, however she managed to join up with the boys, falling in love with one of the members known as Frenchie. Kimiko possesses enhanced strength, speed, and durability, which seems to be a common trend amongst most Compound V users. She also seems to have some degree of military/combat training, as she's a very skilled fighter. She was able to keep up with A-Train, a character who can run insanely fast. This character A-Train moves so quickly he is able to search through large parts of the city really quickly, and can also move so fast that normal humans can barely perceive him. Despite this, Kimiko was able to attack him before he managed to run off with her. She was also able to survive going toe-to-toe with some very dangerous superheroes like Black Noir and Soldier Boy. Kimiko also possesses a healing factor which allows her to heal from fatal wounds in seconds. She was able to heal from having her stomach torn open, having several parts of her body slashed, having several broken bones, etc. This makes her incredibly difficult to kill, as any damage she sustains will quickly be healed. Despite this healing factor, one thing that does not get fixed is the fact that she's mute. She has to use sign language in order to communicate, and Frenchie is basically the only one on the team who knows how to translate that. But this doesn't end up being a problem most of the time. Next, we'll quickly go over the two last members, MM and Frenchie. Now, MM and Frenchie don't have any superpowers of their own, however they do take down superpowered individuals with various weapons. Common equipment they would have on them would include things like pistols, shotguns, and also sleeping gas. I don't think it would be too crazy to assume that they would have sleeping gas on them as some sort of standard equipment, as the boys use sleeping gas on multiple occasions and it's a common thing they use to take down supes. Now this isn't including the Russian nerve agent which they made in Season 3. If you don't know, it's a very dangerous nerve agent that kills most humans. But since that's really difficult for them to access normally, I won't be giving it to them here. Frenchie is a very intelligent chemist, and with prep time he can create some incredible things, such as bullets made out of carbon metamaterial, and also sleeping gas, nerve agents, etc. Only problem is Frenchie is like very high a lot of the time. It's kind of a problem. He does kind of work past it at the end of Season 3 though, so that's cool. MM is another member of the boys who also has a problem with dangerous supes. Members of his family were killed by the superhero Soldier Boy, and because of this he harbored a hatred for him for the rest of his life. MM again is a skilled fighter and also is capable of using various firearms. And as stated before, he often uses things like sleeping gas to take down certain opponents. However, there are some supes who are capable of resisting it.
Hell of things.
MM also happens to have a very powerful shotgun, which was seemingly able to dent Soldier Boy's shield, but it's hard to tell.
Fuck you, bitch.
So there you have it, that's essentially the boys' team summarized. They're a very dangerous group comprised of skilled fighters and also people with superhuman abilities. To top it all off, they have access to various degrees of firearms, explosives, and knockout gases. But how do they stack up to their competition? Well, let's find out. Next up, we'll be going over Team High Guardian Spice, members of Guardian Academy who are training to become, well, Guardians. The first member we're going to be taking a look at is Rosemary, the pseudo-team leader. Rosemary is the daughter of Lavender, another powerful Guardian who became well-renowned for their heroics. She possesses her mother's sword, Flowering Thorn, which has a special enchantment on it which makes it essentially immutable. Since I gave an edge to the boys by giving two of their members Temp V, I'm going to also give an edge to the High Guardian Spice crew here and say that Rosemary's sword is essentially unbreakable for the purposes of this hypothetical. While parts of the hilt can break, the blade on the sword itself cannot be broken. I think this is fair considering that it's narratively implied that the blade can basically not be broken, so it would make sense for it to happen here. Although the sword's blade being unbreakable might not matter all too much for reasons I'll get into whenever we start talking about the fight itself. Rosemary has gone through basic martial arts training and is also somewhat skilled at using her sword Flowering Thorn, as she's taken on trained assassins like Olive and Mandrake. Rosemary, like many characters in High Guardian Spice, is incredibly athletic and can leap great distances. Several characters in the show which are comparable to Rosemary are able to leap great distances, hopping across buildings and jumping off buildings perfectly fine. And High Guardian Academy makes its students go through dangerous obstacle courses which require great degrees of athleticism to complete. On top of having great feats of athleticism, Rosemary's sword, Flowering Thorn, is also able to generate wind currents when it's swung that are powerful enough to cut into parts of buildings. Now once again, we're only including standard equipment, which means Rosemary won't get things like the mermaid transformation ring, healing water, and other stuff. Her only equipment is essentially just Flowering Thorn, as that's what she carries around with her most of the time. Next on the roster we have Sage, a character I definitely don't despise. Now Sage and Amaryllis are two characters who I think will be major players in this fight, mostly due to the fact that they have magic. They have access to a large variety of spells which give them a huge amount of hacks abilities. Sage is able to fly at high speeds by using her Terrasphere and is able to carry two people at once on it. Sage's Terrasphere is a powerful magic item that she keeps with her at all times. It's an orb that can transform into a staff, which allows her to cast new magic spells. These spells are very easy to cast and can come out to be extremely powerful. Sage is able to fire out bursts of energy from her Terrasphere that can do damage to enemies. She's also able to conjure water, fire, and electricity from her staff. She's able to trap people in extremely durable bubbles, and on top of this, she's able to conjure large hordes of animals. Even without her Terrasphere, she's still capable of casting magical spells through Old Magic, which is essentially drawing runes in the air to cause magical effects. One game-changer spell I think Sage has access to is the Sleep spell, which allows you to knock out a person in a single hit. If someone gets affected by this spell, they're essentially out of the battle if they aren't able to resist it or find someone else to wake them up. Now again, we're only going with standard equipment here, meaning that Sage would only have access to her Terra Sphere and she wouldn't have access to certain things like potions and other stuff. While Sage is not a very skilled hand-to-hand combatant, her magic makes up for that with how powerful it is. Not to mention Terra Spheres are also capable of creating portals that can travel long distances, but it wouldn't be in character for Sage to use this. Next up, we have Time, an elven archer from the Fairy Woods. Time is a very skilled acrobat and marksman with her short bow and is able to land shots from long distances. She's able to quickly draw multiple arrows into her bow and fire them out at rapid pace. She has been known in the past to put sleeping potion on her arrows, causing people to get hit with them to get knocked out. However, she only uses this once, so I wouldn't consider it standard equipment. On top of her expert skills with her short bow, she also has access to old magic, although it can drain her energy if she uses it too much. She's able to manipulate plants with old magic, causing them to bend to her will. Time is also able to perform demon summoning rituals given enough prep time, however the demons aren't necessarily on her side. She's also able to create traps with her old magic, allowing her to turn normal vines into weapons. She was able to create a magically electrified net that could hold down a demon which was able to turn into mist. All of this combined makes her a very deadly adversary. Next up we have Parsley the Dwarf. Parsley is insanely powerful, being able to smash through solid stone with her hammer. She's one of the most physically powerful members of the team, considering she can bend metal with her thumbs, amongst other feats. She's also a very capable blacksmith, being able to forge various objects such as armor and weapons. She's gone through the same martial arts training as Rosemary, but outside of that there isn't much more to say. It's important to note that she's another character who doesn't have access to magic. Next up we have Snapdragon, who's probably the weakest member of this team. He doesn't really do much throughout the series, save for fighting off an octopus mech that one time, but he didn't really finish the job and he had to get help from other people. He typically uses a rapier as his main weapon, and he's very athletic, but outside of that there's not much to mention here. He can do this. So you know, that's something. Next up we have Amaryllis, who is another major player in this battle. I actually made a whole video power scaling her earlier, which I'll link in the description if you want to check that out. She's another magic user like Sage, which means she has access to an insane amount of spells that could really help her out in this fight. She takes the same magic classes as Sage and also is more skilled at new magic, so she should have all the spells that Sage has, probably even more. On top of her Terra Sphere, she also carries an axe, which she has used more than once, so I guess we'll give it to her here. What really makes her dangerous is the number of spells that she can cast, and I'll go over a few more that I think will be relevant for this fight. Using her Terra Sphere, she's able to create energy barriers which can protect her from outside attacks. Magical shields in High Guardian Spice have also been shown to redirect energy attacks on multiple occasions. This is especially relevant because multiple enemies on the opposing team use energy attacks, so it's possible that they might be able to redirect their blasts right back at them. The shields that Terra Spheres can generate can encompass multiple people, making them an easy tool for defense. This would make Sage and Amaryllis very useful as support, since they're able to redirect attacks and also block incoming attacks from enemies. Amaryllis is also able to cast spells which allow her to extract memories from opponents, but this usually takes some setup time. I don't think it's very likely that she'll be able to get a memory spell off in the middle of this fight, but you never know, could happen. So in summary, we have a bunch of acrobatic magic using teenage death warriors. But are they strong enough to take down the boys? Well, let's find out. So now that we've summarized each team, who wins? Well, there's a lot of ways that this could go, considering that there are 12 combatants on the field. There's a lot you need to take into consideration here, considering all the abilities and equipment each team has at their disposal. I think first we should go over what advantages each team has over one another. Now remember, since physical stats are equalized for this matchup, even the weaker characters can still be useful since they'll all be around the same level of strength. To make this more simple, I'll say this also applies to all of their weapons, except for Flowering Thorn's durability, which as we stated before, might as well be unbreakable for this matchup. The biggest advantage that Team High Guardian Spice has to be magic 100%. The boys have fought many superheroes with a wide variety of abilities, however they've never encountered magic before, and magic like this is incredibly powerful. As said before, they have access to spells that could take someone out of the battle entirely in one shot. And these magic users have a wide variety of spells that can work for both offense and defense. Another area in which the High Guardian Spice team has a major advantage in is mobility. Everyone on their team might as well be a professional gymnast, and they can leap super high. On top of this, characters like Sage can fly at ridiculously high altitudes, and she's also capable of holding multiple people at a time on her Terra Sphere. Despite having two major advantages, that being mobility and magic, they're not necessarily guaranteed to win. An important thing to note when regarding their magic is the fact that they typically don't use many of their spells in combat situations. Characters like Sage and Amaryllis typically resort to using energy blasts, force fields, and flight, and that's about it. While they do have multiple very powerful spells, such as the sleep spell which could take someone out of the battle, they probably won't use it right away, and will wait until things get really desperate to pull them out. So what advantages do the boys have in this matchup? First and foremost, they're far more intelligent with the use of their abilities, and on top of this, they've gone into more combat situations than the Spice Girls have. Outside of their combat training, the High Guardian Spice crew has only gone up against like 2 human opponents, Olive and Mandrake, and they typically get split up and don't do very well in those situations. The boys also have access to more modern weaponry, as they're standardly seen using things like assault rifles, handguns, etc. This gives them a weapon advantage over most of the members of the High Guardian Spice crew, since they're typically using things like short bows and swords. However, we have to remember that Terraspheres are a thing, and those are incredibly powerful weapons, being able to shoot long-range explosive laser blasts that can send people flying backwards. The boys also have used explosives on various occasions, and I don't think it would be out of the question for them to have like some grenades or something on hand as standard equipment. They did have a rocket launcher at one point, but I don't think that's something they would have on hand, considering they never even got to use it. However, the biggest advantage that I think the boys have in this matchup has definitely got to be Huey. Huey has the ability to teleport, which if you've seen my other videos, you know that that's an incredibly powerful ability. Having a teleporter on your side is very impressive, but that's not the only reason I think Huey will be a major game changer in this matchup. Huey has the ability to teleport multiple people by grabbing onto them. And whenever he teleports someone, everything they have, including their clothing, is left behind in the place they originally were before they left. This is incredibly dangerous because this means Huey can basically disarm anyone on the opposite team if he can grab them. Not only this, but he could teleport them miles away from the battlefield, meaning they won't be able to help their other teammates if he gets a hold of them. This is something Huey would easily come up with, as he's teleported people miles away before. Now, as I said before, characters like Sage and Amaryllis can create magical barriers that can potentially deflect energy attacks. This could be pretty dangerous since both Starlight and Butcher use energy attacks, so they might get reflected. However, Huey has been shown to be able to teleport into enclosed spaces, and there's nothing implying that these shields block teleportation in any manner. This means Huey would easily be able to bypass any barriers that Amaryllis or Sage are able to put up. This also could be useful for helping out teammates if Sage tried to trap them in some kind of bubble. Huey could easily warp them right out, although this would come at the cost of removing their equipment from them. Huey would be a major threat in this battle, and since neither team knows what they're going up against right from the get-go, he may be able to snag 1 or 2 people on the opposite side before they realize what's happening. If one of the members got snagged, they'd end up being teleported miles away with none of their gear, not even knowing what's going on. It would be incredibly difficult for any members of the team to get back into the fight after this happened to them. Not only would they have no clue where they are, they'd also lose all of their gear. Without Terraspheres, they really don't have a method of long-range transportation. Even if they knew where they were going, it would still take forever to get back on foot. This means that with one grab, Huey can essentially remove people from the battlefield entirely. It's for this reason that I think Huey would be the biggest obstacle that the High Guardian Spice team would have to overcome if they wanted to win. First, they would need to figure out what he's doing. Secondly, they would have to stop him. This is easier said than done, considering Huey can easily teleport out of the way of attacks. He's also shown to be able to spam his teleportation ability over and over and over again during fights. If the High Guardian Spice crew isn't able to deal with Huey as quickly as possible, this could end very badly for them. In my opinion, if Huey was able to get rid of both Amaryllis and Sage early on, the fight is pretty much won. Both of them would lose access to their Terraspheres, and no one else on the team is shown being capable with new magic. Even if another team member managed to snag their Terrasphere, they wouldn't know how to use it. However, in order for Huey to know to do this, he would have to discern that both of them are major threats, which could take some time. At the start of the battle, I could definitely see Huey getting off 1 or 2 surprise teleportations while everyone's still confused about what each other's powers are. Once members of Team High Guardian Spice realize what Huey is doing, they're probably going to focus on him to get him out of the fight as quickly as possible. Now, they have seen teleportation before, but probably not used in this manner. Not only would Huey be able to easily avoid their attacks by just teleporting out of the way, he would also have several other team members backing him up. They'd have to take down Huey while also dealing with a barrage of automatic gunfire from characters like Frenchie and MM. On top of this, Sage and Amaryllis would have to protect their teammates from laser blasts coming from Butcher and Starlight. If Sage and Amaryllis are taken out of the battle, that extremely limits the High Guardian Spice team's ability to win this. They would lose all of their best defensive options, along with the ability to one-shot knock out members of the other team. Most of the members of Team High Guardian Spice use close-range weapons, with the exception of Time, who uses a short bow, which would be outclassed by the automatic weapons that the other team has. Without their force fields, they'd be very vulnerable to getting picked off from range, as Starlight's laser blasts can send them flying backwards, disallowing them from closing the distance. Butcher's eye lasers have also been shown to send people flying backwards as well. Now, I'm not saying that them closing the distance would be impossible, just very difficult if the boys are keen on keeping them at range. The High Guardian Spice Crew may be able to use their better mobility to avoid the laser fire coming at them, but it would be very difficult. Now, there is also the possibility that characters like Butcher would prefer to get up close to just beat the shit out of them. I could see that being a possibility, but I think if the magic users are gone and the boys realize they have a better chance at taking them out from range, they're gonna take it. One strategy that I think could net a win for the High Guardian Spice Crew is if they were to have Amaryllis and Sage fly up immediately and just start spamming spells from above. If they were flying high up in the air, it would be very difficult for Huey to grab hold of them, even with his teleportation. But I don't think this would be in character for Team Spice, since that's not something they would usually think of. What's more likely to happen is I think a character like Rosemary might rush straight forward into battle, leaving Sage and the others behind. The boys would immediately open fire, firing out bullets and laser blasts. Sage would immediately try to defend the others, creating force fields blocking or redirecting the laser blasts. Amaryllis would quickly return fire, shooting lasers right back at them. It's very likely that a couple characters on both sides are going to get hit in the laser fire. It's at this point I think Huey would teleport in, focusing on Amaryllis as she's the one shooting lasers at everyone. If I had to guess, the first people to get taken out in the fight would have to be Amaryllis and Rosemary due to how aggressive they are. They're extremely reckless and loud and would draw the attention of pretty much everyone on the field. Now again, there's a lot of ways that this could go down due to the wide variety of powers each group has, but I think this is the most likely for the opener. Outside of Sage, Amaryllis, and Huey, there are also some other threats on the field that are worth considering. Kamiko, for example, would be very dangerous because of her healing factor. If one of the members of the other team managed to slash or damage her, she could quickly heal it. I think Kamiko could easily take out characters like Snapdragon and Rosemary that rely on close quarters combat. With the extent of her healing factor, I think the only way they could take her down would be just decapitating her. But that's not something they would typically go for, at least not at first, and by the time they figured it out, they're probably already dead. To make a long story short, if the High Guardian Spice Crew doesn't deal with Huey right away, they could be in a losing position before the first punch is even thrown. Their two saving graces, Amaryllis and Sage, would probably be quickly dealt with by Huey if he manages to grab either one of them. And outside of Terraspheres, they're basically outgunned, as most of the members wouldn't be able to deal with long-range weaponry. This is also ignoring things like sleeping gas, which the boys also have access to. If the boys manage to get a sleep gas grenade inside of one of Sage's force fields before she can close it, that could be the end of the fight right there. It's for all of these reasons that I think the boys have a higher chance of winning this fight than the High Guardian Spice Crew does. Now, of course, I'm not saying it's impossible that the High Guardian Spice Crew could come out on top. For instance, if Amaryllis got a lucky shot in on Huey right at the start, they could have a better chance at winning this. However, I do think it's more likely that the boys would come out on top in this scenario. For the most part, they have access to better weapons and are capable of fighting at both long and close range just as effectively. There are also characters like Kamiko who have a healing factor and would be able to fight far longer than most of the other members. So in summary, the boys win this matchup more times than not, due to the fact that Huey exists. And I know it's surprising that Huey of all people ended up being the MVP in this matchup, but that's what V24 can do for you. But maybe you disagree. Maybe you think Team High Guardian Spice actually has a chance of winning this more than the boys do. Well, I'll be interested to hear your reasoning in the comments down below. This has been Dave, and I am signing off.
Good talk. Think about it. I'm here all day, all right?